Hello, my name is Emery, and last week my mother looked a stranger in the eye and said, "She's the maid, not family." My father laughed. My brother did too. They didn't know I was the one who built the very club they were standing in. They thought they'd erased me with a single sentence, humiliated me in front of donors and friends. But they didn't know I kept the originals, the documents, the ownership, the power. What happens when the family that raised you only did so to one day take everything from you? And what do you do when you're finally ready to take it back? The sun was already high over Scottsdale when I pulled into the rear lot of Golden Pine Golf Club. I always used the back entrance. Less spectacle, fewer questions. It was easier to be invisible that way. No one asked why I wasn't on stage. No one wondered why my name didn't appear on the brochures. Let them assume I was just another staffer walking through hallways I designed, managing people I had personally hired. I greeted Manuel at the kitchen door with a small nod. He opened the door for me without hesitation. "Morning, Ms. Wynne," he whispered, glancing to see if anyone was around. I gave him a subtle smile, the kind we had shared for years. I made my way through the quiet corridors, each step reminding me of the last 2 decades I had spent building this place from the dirt up. I used to think legacy meant family. These days, I wasn't so sure. The club's main lounge was already bustling when I arrived. Guests from all over the city filled the room, dressed in pastels and florals, holding their mimosas like trophies. I slipped into the corner near the east window, keeping a strategic distance. The sunlight hit the marble bar just right. From here, I could see everything. Hear nearly everything, too. They arrived fashionably late, of course. Meredith swept in first, lips glossed, hair sculpted, posture as if she were floating above the rest of us. Ronald followed, looking like he was still stuck in some country club from the 80s. Blazer too tight, tie too loud. Sterling trailed behind, adjusting his collar like he expected applause. They greeted everyone with that practiced warmth reserved for donors and socialites. I didn't flinch. I'd trained myself not to. They didn't see me. That was part of the plan. The introductions were already underway when Meredith and her entourage joined a cluster of women near the veranda. I watched her slip seamlessly into their circle, her laughter already winning them over. Then it happened. One of the women, maybe new to town, gestured toward me and asked, "Who's that?" Meredith didn't even pause. "Oh, her?" she said, sipping from her flute. "She's the maid, not family." There was a beat of silence before Ronald chuckled. Then Sterling followed with a louder, more theatrical laugh. "She just likes to hang around here," he said. "Gives her something to do." Their words didn't land like a slap. They didn't have to. They landed like a quiet, surgical incision, precise and bloodless. Around me, a few staff members looked down. Some flinched. One young waitress looked up, lips parted, uncertain. I met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. "Don't make a scene. Not yet." Inside me, though, something buckled. Not because of the words, but because I saw the truth in their faces. They weren't joking. They weren't pretending. They believed it. The brunch continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, empty niceties. None of it touched me. I stayed near the windows, counting seconds, tracking each breath like I was underwater. When the MC took the stage, a hush fell. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today we honor the Wynne family for their incredible contribution to the spring renovation of Golden Pine." My heart didn't skip. It clenched. "The design," he said, "the funding, the vision, all spearheaded by Sterling Wynne." Applause. Sterling stood, adjusted his jacket, kissed Meredith's cheek, and took the stage. Ronald gave him a congratulatory clap on the back. No one looked at me. The slideshow began. Photos of the new clubhouse entrance, the updated dining terrace, the eco-sustainable putting green, all the things I had fought for, negotiated for, paid for. The final slide read, "Vision realized. Sterling Wynne, Director of Development." I didn't hear the rest. I excused myself quietly, weaving through the clusters of guests, past the bar, down the mirrored corridor where no one ever looked too long. My heels echoed softly on the tile. I stopped in front of the full-length mirror, just outside the Founder's Lounge. My reflection stared back, composed, unremarkable, invisible. "You built all this," I whispered, "and now you watch them take it." I didn't linger in the corridor. Once my own words echoed back to me. "You built all this, and now you watch them take it." I knew I had to keep walking. I headed toward the staff lounge, a space tucked behind the main hall, mostly unseen by guests. The kind of place where no one dressed in pearls or pastel jackets ever dared step into. It was quiet back there, quieter than I needed it to be. That kind of quiet lets your mind roam places you've tried to fence off. I passed a table stacked with used glassware, remnants of brunch still clinging to them. As I reached for the door to the lounge, a boy, couldn't have been more than 20, emerged, arms full of dirty plates and linen napkins. He looked flustered, juggling too much. He spotted me, exhaled in relief, and thrust a tray toward me. "Ma'am, can you take these back to the kitchen for me? I'm already behind and they're asking for more champagne flutes at table 5. He didn't wait for an answer. I took the tray. He was gone. I carried it silently to the back door, handed it off to one of the dish staff, then turned back. Not once did I correct him. I didn't even feel angry. That's what rattled me. There was no indignation, only a hollow acceptance. Of course he thought I worked here. Everyone did. Returning to the hallway, I leaned against the wall for a moment and pulled the invitation from my purse. It was slightly bent at the corner from being crushed in my bag earlier. The thick cardstock still smelled faintly of rosewater and printer ink. Miss Lily Wynne, administrative support, guest of Mr. Sterling Wynne. I ran my finger across the embossed edge. It hadn't been an oversight. It was deliberate. I remembered how Meredith had waved me off when I asked if she'd already RSVP'd. "We had to give you a title," she had said. "Didn't want them to think you just wandered in." Wandered in, to a building I financed, on land I secured. With vendors I negotiated, contractors I paid, designs I approved. I slipped the card back into my purse, unsure why I hadn't torn it in half right then and there. Maybe because I'd spent years learning to swallow my pride before anyone saw it, and today, they'd seen too much already. I needed air, but not the kind near the brunch crowd. I headed down the west wing instead. It was the quieter part of the club, the hallway that led to the spa and offices. My shoes tapped softly on the hardwood as I passed paintings I had chosen, sconces I'd personally argued for against budget constraints. Everything here had my hand on it, and yet, somehow, none of it bore my name. 2 staff members crossed paths with me near the locker area. They gave polite nods, but kept their distance. Not out of rudeness, more like confusion. They'd been told not to ask questions about me, to treat me with courtesy but no acknowledgement, Meredith's style, as if I were a ghost drifting between the walls of my own home. I finally stepped into the Founder's Lounge. It was dimly lit, quiet except for the soft buzz of the overhead lights. A small brass plaque adorned the interior wall, hidden behind a vase of seasonal flowers. I moved the arrangement aside. Founder, Emery Wynne. I traced my name with my index finger. The metal was cool, soulless, like my family's affection. There was no ceremony when they mounted it, no ribbon cutting. Just silence, followed by a quick pivot to whatever Sterling had said that day. I sat on the corner leather bench near the window and poured myself a cup of tea from the self-serve table. The Earl Grey had gone lukewarm, but I didn't care. I just needed to hold something in my hands that didn't disappoint me. From my purse, I pulled out a small notebook I kept close for moments like these. On the cover, it read in silver ink, "In case I forget who I am." I opened it to a blank page and began writing. Today, I was again reminded that, to them, I'm an accessory, not a daughter, not a partner, just a placeholder, something they move around to suit the frame. I stared at the words. They didn't feel dramatic. They felt clinical, like a diagnosis after years of quiet symptoms. After a while, I looked up. Across from me, hung perfectly straight on the wall, was a framed portrait of the Wynn family, taken during the club's opening gala. Everyone in tuxedos and gowns, champagne flutes mid-toast, Sterling center stage, Meredith and Ronald beaming at his sides. I wasn't in it, not even in the background. The air inside my home felt still, untouched, like everything inside had been holding its breath since I left that morning. I slipped off my shoes by the door, letting them fall to the side. No one would pick them up but me. That was the beauty and the curse of living alone. Every quiet thing stayed where I left it. Every silence lingered a little longer than it should. I walked into my study and reached for the light switch, flooding the room in a soft amber glow. My eyes landed immediately on the bookshelf across the room, where the photo albums lived. They hadn't been opened in years, maybe longer. I used to tell myself I didn't have time, but truthfully, I avoided them the same way you avoid certain mirrors. You know what's coming, and you know you won't like the reflection. I pulled down the one labeled Sterling Age 10. The blue velvet cover was worn, the edges curled slightly. Sitting down on the armchair by the window, I opened the book carefully, page by page, until I reached the photo I already knew would hurt. Sterling's 10th birthday. A chocolate cake with white frosting. Balloons floating just above everyone's heads. Meredith in pearls, Ronald with his signature cigar, and Sterling at the center, with a grin that could cut glass. I wasn't in the frame, but I remembered the moment perfectly. I'd been there. I'd helped blow up the balloons. I'd set the table and placed every plate with my own hands. I'd even tied the ribbons around Sterling's gift boxes, because Meredith said my fingers were dainty enough not to ruin the bows. I remembered standing near the edge of the living room, holding a slice of cake I wasn't hungry for, when Meredith had leaned in and whispered, "Sweetheart, step aside so your brother's moment can shine." So I had stepped aside, like I always did, like I was expected to. I closed the album and rested it on my lap for a moment before placing it on the coffee table. My hands trembled slightly, not from the photo, but from the realization that the habit of stepping aside had become a posture, a lifestyle, an identity. That memory bled straight into the one from earlier today. Meredith's voice, soft and practiced, as she leaned toward one of the club's biggest donors and said, "We'd prefer if you don't post any group photos. Emery doesn't really represent our family image." Our family image. What was I then? An error in the shot? A blurred edge in someone else's life? I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I was still wearing the same pale blue dress from the brunch, though now it was slightly wrinkled and smelled faintly of rosemary and spilled white wine. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the woman who'd spent her entire adult life trying not to be in the way. "You've been stepping aside your whole life, haven't you?" I whispered. The words didn't echo. They just sat there between me and the mirror, like an unwelcome guest who wouldn't leave. I went back to the study and powered on my laptop. It took a moment to boot, long enough for me to second-guess what I was about to do. I moved the cursor to the folder labeled Trust Documents and clicked it open. Inside was a single file. Inheritance, legal owner, Emery Wynn. I stared at it. That one line reminded me of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a very long time. Possession, ownership, not just of property or money or title, but of my own damn story. I opened the document. Every paragraph was a reminder of what I'd built. Every clause reinforced a truth they had tried so hard to erase. It was all legal, clean, bulletproof. Ronald had once joked that paper doesn't argue. He was right. This document didn't scream or fight or demand attention. It simply existed. Like me. For years, I thought staying quiet was a form of respect. For them. For the idea of family. But maybe it had just been fear. Fear of rocking the boat, of making myself too visible in a family that had always preferred I blend into the background. But this document, it didn't blend. It stood. It stood for something. And maybe it was time I did too. I didn't move for a full minute after seeing the words on the screen. Inheritance, legal owner, Emery Wynne. Something inside me shifted, not with a bang, but like a floorboard quietly cracking under weight it had held too long. My name was there in black and white, etched into the legal bone structure of the very thing my family had been parading around like a trophy. I closed the file and leaned back. The house was quiet, but not peacefully so. The kind of quiet that follows disappointment, not serenity. I glanced out the window. The sun had dropped behind the mountains, and dusk was laying its blue fingers across the yard. My phone chimed. It was Dax, my assistant, but more importantly, one of the few people in the club who treated me with the respect you show someone who earned their place. The subject line, "You need to see this." There was no message, just a forwarded thread. A long one. I clicked through. At first, it seemed like routine chatter between Sterling and a law office, but the tone shifted halfway through. I reread one particular message twice. Can we move her into a non-voting position if we claim she's emotionally unfit? I have my mother's support. It was dated 4 days ago. I felt my hands go cold. I pressed one to my chest, as if to steady the rhythm starting to rise. Not anger yet, not fear either. Something slower, deeper, like when you smell gas in the house and know you have exactly one choice: act fast or let it all blow. The next email was from Meredith. "It's for her own good," she'd written. "She'll be free to rest." I almost laughed. Not a joyful sound, more a short, sharp release of disbelief. For my own good. That's how they always wrapped it. Every cut they'd ever made had been dressed up in silk. When I was 12 and wanted to join Dad's weekend real estate tours, he'd said, "It's not that kind of place for girls, sweetheart. You'll be bored." When I built Golden Pine and asked to be introduced as the founder, Meredith said, "Let Sterling handle the public side. He has a way with people." Always for my own good. At the bottom of the email thread was an attachment. Audio. I hesitated. Then I clicked play. Ronald's voice came through first, steady as ever. "She has no husband, no kids, no one. We're her only family, and we can take care of everything." There was a pause. Then Meredith responded, softer. "We let her play business. Now we take over." That sentence was so casual, so offhand, it took a second to register. Like someone describing a chore. We let her play. Now we take over. The cup of tea on my desk had gone cold. My hands didn't shake anymore. That reaction had passed. What replaced it was something calmer and far more dangerous. I picked up my phone and called Dax. He answered on the first ring. "Emery?" "Prepare the legal lockdown," I said. "Effective immediately. No internal transfers. No changes to operational authority. No access to vendor lists. Lock every file, every platform, every document. Now." There was no hesitation. Just a quiet, "Yes, ma'am." And then he hung up. I sat in silence, feeling the engine inside me start to hum again. Not like before. This wasn't grief or resignation. This was something sharpened, intentional. I stood and walked to the cabinet in the far corner of my office. Inside was a fireproof safe. I unlocked it and pulled out the hard copy of the deed. My name, my title, my signature. No debate, no confusion. I didn't just own the club, I was the club. I returned to my desk, pulled open the voice memo app on my phone, and hit record. "My name is Emery Wynne," I said, my voice low but certain. "And for most of my life, I've been quiet, polite, accommodating. You taught me silence. I learned to weaponize it." I ended the recording. The quiet in the room was different now, charged, alive. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be stepping aside for it. I ended the call with Adria as I sat alone in my car, the engine still running. The club's parking lot shimmered under the Arizona sun, but the heat outside couldn't compete with the slow burn moving beneath my skin. It was Sunday afternoon, just one day since they humiliated me at the brunch, and here we were again. Another public event. Another chance for Meredith and Sterling to make sure my name stayed tucked behind someone else's. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the visor mirror, and stepped out of the car. The charity award ceremony was already in full swing, with music playing softly from the courtyard speakers and guests milling about with small plates of hors d'oeuvres. Inside, the air was cooler, but the temperature between me and the people who knew my name had never been more frigid. I moved quietly to the back of the room, as I often did, watching Sterling work the crowd. He was in his element, shaking hands, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, and accepting compliments he didn't deserve. The moment came without fanfare. The announcer took the stage and tapped the mic. Today, we honor the incredible vision behind the transformation of Golden Pine Golf Club. Please welcome the driving force behind its growth, Sterling Wynn. Applause. A lot of it. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. Sterling walked to the podium, straightening his jacket like he was about to accept a Nobel Prize. He began with practiced charm. When we started this renovation, my goal was simple: elevate Golden Pine to be the crown jewel of Scottsdale. My mouth twitched. We? He continued. From the new terrace to the improved irrigation system, every detail reflects a commitment to excellence. And it couldn't have been done without the support of my family. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. No mention of my contributions. No acknowledgement. Not a single syllable. When the speech ended, I made my way to the exit. I needed out before my restraint cracked wide open. That's when I passed the new executive members board in the lobby. At the top, Meredith Wynn, honorary advisor. Then, Sterling Wynn, director of development. At the bottom, in small letters, Emery Wynn, facility assistant. Facility assistant. I stared at the plaque. A staff member hovered nearby, nervously fiddling with a tray of empty glasses. He glanced at me, then back down. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "We thought you approved it." I nodded once, not at him, but at the audacity. I kept walking. The ceremony was wrapping up, the crowd trickling back toward the stage for final remarks. I didn't plan to say anything, but something changed when I passed the side entrance to the platform. I stopped. My silence had served them for years. It wouldn't today. As the host thanked everyone for attending, I stepped onto the stage from the wings. No one noticed at first. Then Sterling saw me and froze mid-handshake. Meredith's smile faltered. I took the microphone. "Before we all head home," I began, voice calm and even, "I'd like to share a quick thought." A hush fell, the kind reserved for something off script. "Today, we celebrate progress," I said, eyes sweeping the room, "and that's a beautiful thing. But let me remind you, no legacy is built by accident, and not everyone listed on a board earns their place there." There were murmurs, shifting feet. Someone cleared their throat. I handed the microphone back, smiled politely, and stepped down. Sterling's face was taut, jaw clenched. Meredith was trying to recover her composure, but her eyes narrowed slightly, a silent question hanging there. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was sharp and dry. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat down with the door open. My phone was already in my hand. I tapped Adria's name. She picked up after one ring. "Yes?" "Move the documents," I said, keeping my tone low and steady. "I want the amendment active by tonight." Sai. By the time I pulled into the club parking lot the next morning, the desert air had already started its usual climb. Monday in Arizona didn't wait for you to catch up. It demanded pace. And that morning, I walked into the boardroom not as the quiet daughter, but as the legal owner with nothing left to lose. The emergency session had been called under the guise of executive planning, but everyone knew something was boiling. Meredith sat at the head of the table, Sterling just to her right. The others, board members I'd once called allies, occupied their spots with stiff postures and tight smiles. Some barely made eye contact. I didn't sit. Instead, I handed a printed copy of an email to the board's legal counsel and connected my laptop to the projector. "I'd like to begin with some clarifications," I said, clicking open the first file. This document was submitted to Wellington and Ross LLP, proposing a restructuring plan for Golden Pine Club. Several members glanced toward Meredith, who remained motionless. Sterling squinted at the screen, as if hoping it would blur before he could read what he already knew was coming. "My name appears here," I continued, pointing to the digital signature line. "Alongside the title, Founder Emeritus, approving the transition of controlling interest to Sterling Wynn." I paused. "My signature is forged." Murmurs. Audible now. Sterling shifted in his seat, eyes darting between faces. Meredith's hand reached for her water glass, but her fingers trembled slightly. "I have the original trust documentation, certified and registered, with all clauses preventing transfer of ownership without my direct and notarized approval. This draft was submitted 3 weeks ago, behind my back." There was a moment of silence thick enough to suffocate the truth. "They think I didn't keep the originals," I said quietly. "They were wrong." I clicked through to the next slide. PDFs of time-stamped wire transfers, project blueprints, and investment ledgers. Each had my name. Each showed my control. Each made it impossible to deny. No one spoke. The moment held long enough for everyone in that room to see how serious I was. But they weren't done trying to humiliate me. Not yet. Hours later, I was told there'd be a follow-up meeting in one of the satellite rooms. "Scheduling issues," they said. "Seating conflict," they claimed. When I arrived, my nameplate was taped, yes, taped, to a folding chair placed directly outside the men's restroom. I stood there for a long minute, not angry, amused, almost. Meredith, seated in the front table just inside the room, looked up and gave a gentle wave as if she hadn't noticed where they'd put me. I smiled. Then, I picked up the chair, set it aside, and walked straight to the projector again. No introduction, no request. I simply began. "Since we're playing with labels today," I said, "I figured we'd revisit some facts." This time, I didn't narrate. I let the images speak, me standing on the dirt lot before the foundation was poured, signing checks for every brick, every payroll cycle, every new hire. Emails showing my correspondence with city officials, investors, designers. The screen ended with a simple line. "This is my club, and I'm not asking for your respect. I'm reminding you of your dependence." No applause, just silence. I closed my laptop, stepped down, and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "She's not playing around anymore." Sterling came after me, almost jogging down the hallway. "What the hell are you doing, Emery?" I stopped without turning. "You had your moment," I said, voice even. "That was mine, and I'm just getting started." I didn't give him time to respond. I walked back to my office, shoulders squared. The hallway felt longer than usual, as if each step rewrote a line of the story they'd tried to erase. By the time I reached my office door, one of the junior staff stood waiting. Her knock had been soft, unsure. "Ms. Wynn," she said, holding a folded memo. "Meredith just asked legal to prepare a full audit of your management practices." Of course she did. I didn't even have time to sit before I noticed the shelf. The door to my office hadn't been forced, and nothing else was touched. But the glass case near the window, where I kept one item, a crystal glass etched with the words "Legacy Builder," stood open, and the glass was gone. No, not gone, shattered. Pieces of it glinted across the hardwood like they'd been kicked around for effect. The stem, still half intact, had rolled beneath the side table. I bent down slowly, picked it up, and ran my thumb across the words that were still visible. Legacy. That was all that remained. Then I saw the note, a neon pink sticky square, resting neatly on the center of my desk blotter. Maybe stick to guest services. M. The breath left my lungs in one long, slow drag. I didn't even react when the sharp edge of the glass caught my palm and drew a thin line of red across the skin. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't heat-of-the-moment rage. That was a message, loud and smug. They didn't just want to win. They wanted me erased. I wrapped a tissue around my hand, not bothering to tape it up. The sting felt strangely clarifying, like my body was catching up to the betrayal my mind had been processing for weeks. By late afternoon, the heat had softened and the garden behind the club cast wide shadows. I sat on the bench near the hydrangeas, my mind still tracing every second from the meeting the day before. I was reviewing legal angles in my head when I heard small footsteps on the gravel path. Junia appeared, holding a juice box in one hand and dragging a worn tote bag in the other. She didn't speak, just walked straight to me, sat beside me, and leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. "Why did Grandma say you don't belong?" she finally asked. My throat clenched. She went on. "You do everything for everyone. You make the parties. You fix things. Why would she say you're not part of the family?" I stared straight ahead. The only sound was the birds somewhere near the trees. "Because sometimes," I said carefully, "the people who say they love you only love the version of you they can control." She didn't respond, but I felt her nod. That quiet understanding you only get from children before the world teaches them to doubt their gut. Later that evening, I stepped into my office again. The broken glass had been swept, the note gone. Probably one of the junior staffers trying to be helpful. On my desk, though, was a folded piece of paper. Not the kind of stationery we used, but the lined, spiral tear edge kind you find in a child's backpack. It was from Junia. A drawing, done in crayon. The club, with wide windows and a banner across the top that read, "Emery's House." Stick figures waved in front, and one, taller, centered, had curly hair and a badge that said, "Boss." Beneath it, in her uneven handwriting, she wrote, "If this is your house, you should sit at the head of the table." I stared at it for a long time. I'd held contracts worth millions, shook hands with city developers and state officials. Nothing ever landed quite like that note. My phone buzzed. Adria. I answered before the second ring. "Go ahead." She didn't hesitate. "We have clearance. I can process the ownership amendment and initiate the formal removal of all secondary beneficiaries. Do you want to execute all at once?" I looked at Junia's note again. "Yes," I said. "Initiate the removal protocol. All names, full transfer, today." She confirmed and hung up. I leaned back in my chair, the room finally quiet in a way that didn't feel heavy. For the first time in a long while, I could see the ending. And I was writing it myself. By Thursday morning, the air inside Golden Pine was tight. You could feel it in the hallway, like everyone had been warned to stay quiet but wasn't told why. Staff walked a little faster, spoke a little softer. Even the usual espresso machine hiss from the cafe was subdued, like it knew better than to interrupt what was coming. I stood at the front of the boardroom, where I had never been allowed to stand before. I didn't wait for the room to settle. I just placed both hands on the chair at the head of the table, the same chair Sterling once told me I didn't need to worry about, and looked around at the faces. Adria, standing beside me in her black blazer, handed out folders without a word. I let the rustle of paper speak first. "These are the finalized documents," I said, my voice calm and without any effort to sugarcoat it. "They confirm the removal of Meredith, Ronald, and Sterling Wynn from my estate." I paused, letting the words sink into the silent air. "You laughed at me in my own house. You erased me in front of strangers. Now, I erase you, legally and permanently." Meredith's jaw tightened, her fingers twisting the edge of her silk scarf. Sterling muttered something under his breath, but Adria cut him off with a firm glance. "The documents also affirm complete ownership of Golden Pine Club remains solely with me," I added. "All titles assigned without my written consent are nullified, effective immediately." Sterling stood abruptly. "You're nothing without us. We built this name together." I didn't even flinch. I was everything without you, I replied. You just couldn't stand to see it. He blinked, stunned silent by the precision of the truth. Meredith finally spoke, her voice strained and trembling. You'd do this to your own family, after all we gave you? You gave me the blueprint for invisibility, I said. I just decided to stop using it. I turned to Adria and nodded once. She closed the final folder and gathered the documents back into her briefcase. The room didn't clap. No one made a sound. Not because they didn't care, but because they understood what they had just witnessed. The moment power changed hands and didn't ask permission. As the room emptied, I reached down to grab my handbag, and that's when I saw it. A small white envelope tucked under my chair. I froze. Inside was a folded sheet of lined notebook paper, the kind pulled from a school binder. The handwriting was round, unpracticed, and achingly sincere. I'm sorry I laughed that day. I didn't know. I love you. Please don't leave without saying goodbye. Junia, I sat back down slowly, holding the note to my chest for a moment. No legal document, no title, no contract had ever hit me like that one sentence. And for the first time in this entire war, I cried. Not from anger, not from betrayal, but from something softer. Relief. A single thread of warmth in a house long gone cold. I wiped my face with the corner of my sleeve, stood, and walked out. Past the board, past the men who dismissed me, past the mother who used her love like a leash, past my brother, who thought legacy could be stolen through a title. At the door, I turned once. You built your story on my silence, I said. Today, it ends. That night, I returned home as the sky dimmed into soft purples. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything of you. I walked into the closet, reached for my smallest suitcase, and began packing. Not out of panic, not to run. Just enough for a break, a clean breath before deciding what came next. As I zipped the case closed, my phone lit up. One missed call. Sterling. I didn't call him back. The voicemail sat there for a while, blinking its passive little alert, asking nothing but reminding me it existed. I listened to it once, just enough to hear Sterling's voice, quieter than usual, trying for something between indignation and curiosity. You really did it, he said, almost like he couldn't believe it. You actually cut us out. Call me back if you feel like explaining. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just confusion over losing access to something he thought would always be his. I deleted it. The next morning, I opened my inbox while finishing my coffee. There, in all its condescension, was Meredith's email. Consider what you've done. Your father is devastated. We raised you better. It took me exactly 10 seconds to type my reply. You raised me to disappear. I finally chose not to. I hit send without reading it twice. Closure, in less than a dozen words. Packing didn't take long. I didn't need much. Just enough for a break. I wasn't fleeing. I just didn't need to be around the debris while it settled. The house felt lighter already, like it too, had grown tired of being a museum for polite suppression. Later that day, I met with Adria one final time. We sat across from each other at the small cafe near the courthouse where we'd filed the last round of documents. I slid the official handover papers across the table. She reviewed them, nodded, and said, "This changes a lot for the club." I sipped my tea. That's the idea. We finalized the transfer of day-to-day management to a foundation supporting first-generation women entrepreneurs, the very people who knew how it felt to be underestimated and what it took to build anyway. Before I left, I asked for one small favor. And that evening, as I stood quietly outside the club for the last time, I saw the new plaque being installed beneath the founder's portrait. Founded by Emery Wynne, a vision quietly built, now boldly owned. I didn't cry. Not out of pride, not even vindication. It just felt correct. At the airport, I checked in without fuss. My suitcase was light, my steps lighter. I had no final speech prepared, no grand thoughts racing through my head. until I heard a familiar voice. Emery! I turned. Junia. She ran to me, backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed, her small arms wrapped around my waist before I had time to drop my bag. You didn't say goodbye. I bent to her level, brushing her hair out of her face. I didn't know if I should. She pulled something from her pocket, a folded yearbook page. In it, under the section titled Real Heroes, was a drawing of two figures, one labeled Dad, the other Aunt Emery. I saved you a seat next to him, she said, but I didn't know who to put next to Real Hero before. I couldn't speak right away. My chest was too full. So I nodded, held her close, and whispered, You just did everything right. Her dad hadn't taught her that. Her grandmother certainly hadn't. She learned it on her own. And maybe that meant there was hope. Boarding call echoed through the terminal. Junia gave me one last hug, and I promised I'd write. Then I stepped onto the plane and let the past stay behind me in that terminal seat. As the aircraft lifted and Scottsdale began to shrink below, I rested my head against the window. They thought silence was weakness, I said softly to myself. But sometimes silence is power waiting to be aimed. I lost a family, but found my voice. And that, finally, is enough. Sometimes the people who raise you aren't the ones who respect you, and family isn't defined by blood, but by how they treat you when no one's watching. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought would always be there? What would you have done in Emery's shoes? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We share real, powerful family stories every week, stories that remind us how pain can lead to strength and silence can become power.